Hi class. Today we're going to be looking at graphing the sine function, just the basic parent sine function, and a amplitude change to the sine function using a fraction less than 1 as the new amplitude value. So first let's look at our sine of x function and just get a good picture of what this looks like without any changes. So we can get all the points on our graph from these 4 points on our unit circle. So we have the angle 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And if we have a radius of 1, we have these 4 coordinate points. The sine value is the y value of these 4 points, or any point on the circle. So if I look at all of the y coordinates, I can get points on my graph. So if I look at on the x-axis here, these x values for our sine and cosine functions are going to be the angles around our circle. If the angle is 0, the sine is 0. If the angle is pi over 2, the sine is 1, and we'll just do it like this. All right, if the angle is pi, the sine is back at 0, and 3 pi over 2, we're down at -1, and back up at 2 pi, it comes back to 0. And I can graph this curve like this, and it keeps going. If I keep going around my circle more than once, I can also go around the circle clockwise instead of counterclockwise and do my negative angles. If I go negative pi over 2, it lands me here at where 3 pi over 2 was, which would put me at -1 for the sine, 0 for negative pi, +1 for negative 3 pi over 2, and 0 for negative 2 pi. And we've got a nice curve there for our sine function. Of course, it keeps going after those values, but we're just going to graph these 2 rotations. So now that I have a good picture of what the sine of x looks like, I'm going to look at changing my amplitude. Now, we see a lot of examples where the amplitude is an integer greater than 1, but I know my students asked me to make a video where the amplitude is a fraction. So all it does is it changes the new height of your graph. So amplitude is height. So instead of going up to 1 and down to -1, it's only going to go up to 1/4 and down to -1/4. And that's really the only change. You can also think of it as this being a vertical dilation. And vertical dilations multiply to our y values on our function. So if I multiply 0 to 1/4, I'm still at 0. But if I multiply 1 to 1/4, I get 1/4. 0 is still 0. -1 would be -1/4. 0 is still 0. So I get a shorter function with a smaller height, only 1/4 of the original height. And of course, I can go back the other direction with heights of 1/4, amplitude of 1/4 in our circle. And that's it for amplitude change.